Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha in this book series titled The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. This program goes book by book, chapter by chapter, over the course of multiple Saturdays, about a year and a half program. We typically start with a brief meditation to prepare the mind, and then we study 10 individual chapters per class. This class, we're in volume 5, chapters 21 through 30, and students will oftentimes be studying these chapters prior to class, and then we come to class and a student will read the chapter. I will share teachings on that chapter and then open up to any questions that you guys have, more like a study group. And then as we go through all 10 chapters, we will then do the next 10 in our following class. You can actually get these books by downloading them from buddhadailywisdom.com. You'll see the link for free books. You can also take that book and go print it if you'd like, or you can order it on Amazon if you'd like a printed version of it. And you can even just read it online if you like. And reading the chapters either before class or after class really helps because you have the words of the Buddha, you have a reference back to the original source text of the Pali Canon, and then you have words from me to help you deeper reflect on what it is that the Buddha is teaching you in his actual words. So I'd like to welcome all of you to our class today, and at the same time invite you to join for a brief meditation as we prepare the mind for learning, which will help you to retain the teachings and then apply them for a longer period of time. So if you'd like to join, you might just take a seated position, either in a chair or on the floor, and then if you would like to join along in the chant, I usually do chanting to ease into meditation, and then I'll give you some brief guidance, and then we'll come out of meditation with some chanting as well. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakhato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savakasangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavito Anupero Purisa Dhammasati Satatawa Manusanang Bhoto Bhagavati. With the lower body comfortable and the hands and arms relaxed, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, steady, gradual, consistent breath. Experiencing the full inhale, breathing in through the nose. And whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Wherever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. สัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาพุทธังมหาเขวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสักขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตวามนุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to gradually make your way out of meditation, I'm going to transition over to our class where we'll have a student volunteer to read the first chapter, which is chapter 21 in volume 5. And then from there, I'll share some teachings on that chapter and then open up to any questions that you guys might have related to that specific chapter. As you have questions, if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put that into the comment section and I'll be able to see that and be able to then help you to answer any questions that you might have. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. I see, Eugene, you asked about your microphone. It does look like your microphone isn't being recognized right now, but you should be able to turn that on through the settings of Zoom. And then as you ask questions and raising your hand, you should be able to ask any questions. If you can't get your microphone working for any reason, you can always use the comment section like you did and ask your questions that way. So I'll go ahead and turn things over to all of you guys. Marcy asked to read the first chapter, which is chapter 21. If you'd like to go ahead, Marcy.
David, 6 benefits in realizing the fruit of stream entry. Monks, these are the 6 benefits in realizing the fruit of stream entry. What 6? 1 is fixed in wholesome teachings. 1 is incapable of decline. 1's discontentedness is limited. 1 comes to possess wisdom not shared by others. 1 has clearly seen causation. 1 has clearly seen casually arising objects. These are the 6 benefits in realizing the fruit of stream entry.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here, chapter 21, the Buddha is explaining the 6 benefits of reaching to this first stage of enlightenment called stream entry. And if you think back to the first class that I taught related to this particular book, volume 5, which is all about the first stage of enlightenment, the Buddha refers to that first stage of enlightenment as stream entry, because just like a log that enters the stream and it's going to eventually get to the ocean, it's only a matter of time. Once a practitioner enters into the first stage of enlightenment, it's only a matter of time before they get to enlightenment. Either in this life or some future life, a maximum of 7 rebirths, they will get to enlightenment. And the ocean is the representing the enlightened mental state. So a log that enters the stream is going to get to the ocean at some point. It's just a matter of time. So here the Buddha is describing 6 individual benefits related to getting to this first stage of enlightenment, referred to as stream entry. The first one is that one is fixed in the wholesome teachings. What he means by this is that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you've eliminated the first 3 fetters. And what a fetter is it's a pollution or a taint or a defilement of the mind. It's like a shackle and a chain around your ankle, keeping you like a prisoner trapped in the unenlightened state and in the cycle of rebirth. So what you're doing along this path to enlightenment in order to get to enlightenment is to eliminate all 10 fetters. All 10 pollutions need to be eliminated in order to experience the enlightened mental state. But to get to this first stage of enlightenment, among other things, one of the primary criteria of getting to the first stage of enlightenment is the elimination of the first 3 fetters. One of those fetters is doubt. Doubt about the Buddha, doubt about the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. So if one has eliminated doubt about the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your ability to get to enlightenment, you are then fixed in the wholesome teachings. Essentially, by the time you meet all the criteria of getting to the first stage of enlightenment, it's kind of like getting to base camp of Mount Everest. I used this analogy in a previous class, that if you're a hiker looking to get to the height of Mount Everest, you're going to need to get to base camp first. And at base camp, you have all the tools and techniques and equipment and knowledge and wisdom that you need to be able to make it to the summit. But before you ever get to base camp of Mount Everest, you've already done a lot of years of preparation of understanding equipment and hiking techniques and all kinds of wisdom that you would have needed to develop in your journey to learn about hiking to get to the base camp of Mount Everest. But now that you're at the base camp of Mount Everest, you have all the tools and techniques and wisdom that you need to get to the actual summit, to the summit of Mount Everest. Well, the same thing is true by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. You've gathered up all the foundational teachings and you're fixed in the wholesome teachings that you've learned, you've reflected to independently verify, and you've practiced, and you've seen significant improvements to the condition of the mind by the time you get to that first stage of enlightenment. So you know without a shadow of a doubt by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment that these teachings are indeed leading to the improvement to the condition of your mind and the condition of your life, and you're fixed on these wholesome teachings, and you know that there's nothing else that's going to help you other than these teachings to get to this enlightened mental state, because you've seen enough improvement by that point that you know that these teachings are indeed going to lead to enlightenment. Even though you haven't attained it yet, you've seen enough improvement that you have confidence that these teachings are leading you exactly where the Buddha said that they would. The second benefit here is that one is incapable of decline. Once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your mind is incapable of regressing backwards from there. All other aspects and all other times during your journey to enlightenment, your mind can actually regress up until you get to that first stage of enlightenment and beyond. So when you first start, if you've been practicing the teachings for a month or 2 or 3, if you became complacent, your mind would regress. Or even 6 months, a year, what have you. If your mind isn't yet in that first stage of enlightenment, your mind would regress. Even in the jhanas, which are preliminary phases that the mind goes through before it gets to the first stage of enlightenment, the mind can regress out of those jhanas. So once you get to this first stage of enlightenment, your mind can't regress backwards. So you've developed a certain amount of concentration and focus, a certain amount of clarity of mind, a certain amount of wisdom, a certain amount of mindfulness and equanimity, a certain amount of loving kindness and compassion, all these other wholesome qualities to get to that first stage of enlightenment. And from that point, your mind can't regress backwards. And this is what the Buddha taught during his lifetime related to training the mind. Well, nowadays we have scientists and doctors, researchers who are actually studying the brain with MRIs, CAT scans, and other devices, because we have these available to us that weren't available during the lifetime of the Buddha. And while the mind and the brain are two different things, there's definitely an effect when you're training the mind to the brain. So when the researchers are studying the brain of individuals who are meditating consistently and for a long-term period, they observe that there's certain physical changes that are happening to the brain that are very positive changes and help one to function in a better way with these changes in the brain. And they observe that once they get to a certain point in their training, that those changes that have occurred, the brain doesn't change back to the way it was prior. That these changes are essentially indefinite for the rest of this life, that they're going to see that the brain isn't going to revert backwards. And this is exactly what the Buddha taught. So science is actually proving what the Buddha taught related to the mind is actually occurring in the brain. So once you get to that first stage of enlightenment, your mind won't regress or decline, or you won't see a diminishing of the qualities of your mind. You'll only see improvement from that point forward. The third benefit he's describing is that one's discontentedness is limited. Based on what you experienced prior to being on the path to enlightenment, and as you first got started on the path to enlightenment, by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness has significantly diminished. It's a mere fraction of what it used to be. In the first stage of enlightenment, you're still experiencing discontentedness, but it's a mere fraction of what you once experienced. So there's this limiting effect, and this is part of what helps you to understand that these teachings are indeed leading to an improved condition of mind and an improved condition of your life, because you can see the truth for yourself. You know what once arose anger in the mind or frustration or other discontent feelings, and now you're experiencing those same set of circumstances and situations, and you're noticing that your mind is peaceful and joyful in those same situations. So you can observe for yourself that the condition of the mind is improving because you know what used to arise anger and frustration in certain situations. So you can then see that and know that these teachings are indeed leading to an improvement. So you'll notice the significant diminishing of discontentedness in the mind by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment. One comes to possess wisdom not shared by others. So in order to get on this path to enlightenment and learn, you're not believing teachings, you're learning, you're reflecting to independently verify, and you're practicing. And as part of this journey, you're cultivating wisdom. That's what actually antidotes the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. That's what transforms the mind away from craving and anger and all these other defilements that are in the mind, is getting to wisdom. And now when you're applying that wisdom, you see the improvement to the condition of the mind. And there's certain wisdoms that you learn as part of this path to enlightenment that other people in the world just don't possess. As you're progressing on this path, you will have deeply understood what's causing your discontentedness and how to actually eliminate it. And as you look out into the world, you'll see that the vast majority of the world is completely unknowing of true reality. They just don't understand that they're causing their own discontent feelings, and they don't know what's causing it. They don't know how to eliminate it. And there's many aspects of the path that you're gaining wisdom about that other people just won't understand. And it's important to know that to be the case, because you can be in certain situations where somebody's describing something and having such turmoil and so much difficulties over something that you see is just so simple and so basic because of your development and accumulation of wisdom. And you really need to arise loving kindness and compassion in this situation, because this person is really struggling and having a lot of turmoil, and it's just because of their lack of wisdom. And you're not interested in being dismissive or talking down to this person with conceit or arrogance. So you really need to arise loving kindness and compassion for all these beings that are struggling in the world because of this lack of wisdom. So as you come to understand this wisdom that is not shared by others, be appreciative of that you've done the work, and know that you're fortunate to have decided to move forward with learning and practicing these teachings, but at the same time, remain humble and also with loving kindness and compassion as you see people are really struggling in the world. Number 5 is one has clearly seen causation. What the Buddha is describing here is the natural law of Gotama, of cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will have clearly seen the natural law of Gotama, and you'll know with 100% certainty that it is the truth. You won't believe in the natural law of Gotama. You will know with 100% certainty that it's truth, because you've seen enough experiences in your past and in your current in your life that you've seen this cause and effect. Because all the teachings of the Buddha, in one way or another, come back to causation and the natural law of Gotama, of cause and effect. And what you're doing is you're learning, you're reflecting to independently verify, and you're practicing to see the truth for yourself. And you become more and more clear of understanding this natural law of Gotama. And even as simple as things like the 5 precepts, there you're learning the natural law of Gotama, or the Eightfold Path, because in the natural law of Gotama, the Buddha teaches in the 5 precepts about living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings and choosing to abandon the taking of life. He teaches about eliminating stealing and sexual misconduct and lying and substances that cause heedlessness. And as you've done these particular things in the past, or maybe as you're even doing them now, you will see this cause and effect relationship, that if you're doing these things, it's going to lead to unwholesome results because they're unwise decisions. And as you make wise decisions based on the natural law of Gotama, you will see the wholesome effects of that. So you will have clearly seen, by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, this causation and this natural law of Gotama. You're still learning it, you're still developing your wisdom around it, but you would have seen it and understand it, that yes, this is indeed the truth. And what you're doing on this journey to enlightenment is getting more and more familiar with that natural law of Gotama, so that you can gain wisdom, make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results, and eliminate your unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. And then number 6, one has clearly seen causally arisen objects. What the Buddha is describing here is dependent origination, that we studied that last week, where there's these certain objects that are arising, that there's ignorance, and based on the condition of ignorance, there's then going to be these volitional formations. There's then going to be consciousness, name and form, which is the physical body. There's the 6 sense bases, contact, feeling, and craving, clinging, existence, birth, aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. The whole mass of discontentedness comes about due to these causally arisen objects. So you will have seen that very clearly. And you would understand things like the universal truth of impermanence, that these conditioned objects, they arise, they change, and they fade away. And you will have had all this wisdom. So these are the 6 benefits that the Buddha is describing as part of realizing the fruit of stream entry. And one of the things that I will share here, which I've already pretty much shared, is one of the other benefits is that you have all the teachings that you need in order to get to enlightenment. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you haven't mastered all the teachings by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, but you've at least explored things like the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the 3 poisons, the natural law of Gotama. You understand what is merit. You understand the 5 aggregates, the 6 sense bases, dependent origination. You have a well-developed meditation practice, and so forth and so on. There's a whole host of teachings that you need to collect up and become very accomplished in view, accomplished in generosity, You would have developed your mindfulness and all these other teachings, but you haven't fully mastered these teachings yet, but you've at least explored them all and understood them. Even things like the 7 factors of enlightenment, you would understand what those things are. So that's what the first part of your journey is doing, just like that hiker is working to get to base camp of Mount Everest and going through all the equipment, techniques, taking all these individual hikes to learn how to do this work to get to the base camp of Mount Everest. You're doing the same thing as you first start your journey, exploring all these different things and collecting up all the foundational teachings so that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you have everything you need in order to make your journey the rest of the way to enlightenment itself, including having a teacher and having resources and having books and being able to reach out for personal guidance and things like this. These are all things that you're developing as you get to that first stage of enlightenment. You wouldn't just stumble into the first stage of enlightenment by accident. You would have had concerted efforts and deliberate decisions that led to that stage of enlightenment. Let me see what questions you guys have on this. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions here. We'll move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 22. And Marcy volunteered to read all the chapters unless there's other people in Zoom that would like to read. Please raise your hand if you would like to read in Zoom. Otherwise, I'll just default to Marcy and let Marcy read each chapter. But all of you guys that are in Zoom, you're welcome to read at any time.
Dream enterer is worth more than being a wheel-turning monarch. Monks, although a wheel-turning monarch, having exercised supreme sovereign rulership over the 4 continents, with the breakup of the body after death, is reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world, in the company of the heavenly beings of the heavenly realm. And there is the Nadana grove, accomplished by an entourage of heavenly nymphs. He enjoys himself, supplied and endowed with the 5 chords of heavenly sensual pleasures. Still, he does not possess 4 things. He is not freed from hell, the animal realm, the realm of afflicted spirits, not freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the netherworld. Although monks, a noble disciple maintains himself by lumps of alms food and wears rag robes, still, as he possesses 4 things, he is freed from hell, the animal realm, the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the netherworld. What are the 4? Here, monks, the noble disciple possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha thus. The Tathagata is the Arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortune, knower of the worlds, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one, the fortunate one. He possesses confirmed confidence in the teachings thus. The teachings are well expounded by the perfectly enlightened one, directly visible, immediate, inviting to one to come and see, applicable, to be personally experienced by the wise. He possesses confirmed confidence in the community thus. The community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is practicing the wholesome way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way. That is, the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. The community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respectful salutations, and unsurpassed field of merit for the world. He possesses the virtues, moral conduct, dear to the noble ones, unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unblotched, liberating, praised by the wise, not misunderstood, and leading to concentration. He possesses these 4 things, and monks, between the obtaining of sovereignty over the 4 continents and obtaining the 4 things, and obtaining of the four things, the obtaining of sovereignty over the four continents, is not worth a 16th part of the obtaining of the four things.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. Let me explain to you first what a wheel-turning monarch is, and then I'll explain to you the rest of this discourse. What a wheel-turning monarch is this is a individual who is leading a population of people and doing so through the wisdom of the teachings of the Buddha. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, there weren't countries and states and presidents and prime ministers, there were kings. And these kings and queens would rule over a certain population of people. And a Buddha coming into the world, a Tathagata arising in the world, this is really great for all of humanity. It helps to move civilization forward because a Buddha arising in the world means that there's deep, profound wisdom about the path to enlightenment that's going to help countless people get to enlightenment during that particular lifetime of the Buddha. And a Buddha is going to turn the Dhamma wheel when they awaken from enlightenment. A Dhamma wheel is a circle with 8 spokes on it that is figuratively on the head of a Buddha. So where the skull is, the top of the scalp and the skull and the back of the head come together, there's a flat spot there. And a Buddha is going to turn this Dhamma wheel counterclockwise upon their awakening to enlightenment. And this is a signification of humanity stepping forward and civilization stepping forward. And a Buddha is then going to work to bring the teachings of the path to enlightenment into the world in a more and more vibrant way so that countless people can experience the enlightened mental state during their lifetime. So a wheel-turning monarch is very helpful to a Buddha because this is a leader of a large population of people who is now sharing their this is a leader who's essentially making decisions in their population of people based on the teachings of the Buddha. So they're going to be practicing things like generosity and loving kindness and compassion. So if you can think of like a president or prime minister or somebody like this, a leader of a large population of people in today's society, if they were functioning based on the teachings of the Buddha, this would be really helpful for that population of people, and it would be helpful for a Buddha to be able to bring their teachings into the world because now more and more people would be experiencing a leader making decisions based on the teachings of the Buddha. So a wheel-turning monarch has great influence to help bring the teachings of the Buddha into the world. And what the Buddha is sharing here is that a wheel-turning monarch, while they're actually quite beneficial, they haven't accomplished that which a stream enterer has accomplished. What a stream enterer has accomplished, among other things, is that they have confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and they're practicing virtuous behavior. So they significantly reduce the harm that they're causing through their moral conduct. And a person getting to the first stage of enlightenment, this is going to be very helpful to anybody who interacts with that individual because they'll be able to function in such a way that other people will be able to absorb certain aspects of the teachings, and then the wisdom can come into the world and help more and more people to experience this enlightened mental state as a stream enterer is interacting with other people. So the Buddha is saying that a wheel-turning monarch hasn't yet accomplished these 4 things, and that because of that, they are still potentially going to be reborn into the lower realms of hell, animal, and afflicted spirits. Remember, the Buddha never uses rebirth in the lower realms as a way to guilt, shame, or fear people into learning and practicing his teachings, because part of what he's doing, and a major significant aspect of what he's doing, is helping you to eliminate guilt, shame, and fear, among other discontent feelings. So here, he's just speaking the truth that if somebody hasn't yet developed these 4 qualities, they have the potential that they could be reborn into the lower realms of existence. So the Buddha is saying that even if a wheel-turning monarch were to be in existence, they're not as beneficial to bringing the teachings into the world to help others to experience this enlightened mental state as much as a stream enterer. A stream enterer has accomplished these 4 things where they have confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and the they're practicing a moral conduct which is significantly reducing any harm that they're putting into the world, because they're now practicing the Eightfold Path, and they've now no longer causing harm through their intentions, their speech, and their actions. So the Buddha is saying that a stream enterer in a wheel-turning monarch, if a wheel-turning monarch has rulership over 4 continents, which is what they must have been aware of during the Buddha's lifetime, that is not as significant as a stream enterer who has obtained these 4 things: the confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and they're practicing this virtuous moral conduct. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Looks like Max has a question. If you'd like to go ahead, Max.
Yes, sir. I was just curious if you had any examples of someone specifically who might be a wheel-turning monarch, whether that's in Chiang Mai or wherever else in the world, if you had examples of specific people.
Yeah, I've seen some individuals here in Thailand who are leaders of Thailand that function very much based on the teachings of the Buddha. The previous king, King Rama #9, who was very well respected by a lot of people in Thailand, he may have been even more than a wheel-turning monarch. He might have been in one of the stages of enlightenment, actually, that he functioned in a way that was very helpful to the Thai people. He died in 2016, so he's no longer here, but he's a great example. I've seen certain prime ministers of Thailand function in ways that I would consider to be functioning based on the teachings of the Buddha. I can give you one simple example of a decision that I saw this person made. Back in 2010, when I was not living here yet, I was visiting Thailand and I saw come on the news that this prime minister was announcing to the Thai people that Cambodia, a neighboring country, had flown an airplane over eastern Thailand, kind of a very open and sparsely populated area, and it dropped a bomb in Thailand. And the prime minister was coming on the TV and explaining to the Thai people what had happened, and that nobody had been killed and nothing like that had happened, and they weren't quite sure why the Cambodians decided to do this. And what they were informing the Thai people about is that they have been in touch with the Cambodian people and their political leaders there, and let them know that they're unsure of why this has occurred. They're going to let them calm down for 2 weeks, and then in 2 weeks' time, they're going to send a delegation to Cambodia and figure out why this occurred, so that it could, they could be resolved and addressed. So to me, this is like functioning through the teachings of the Buddha, because not every country would function that way. Depending on what country you live in, if a neighboring country came and dropped a bomb on you, what would your leaders do? Right? So here in Thailand, they understood that if they went ahead and they started bombing Cambodia right away, it would escalate this situation. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to extinguish this Dhamma. And since they don't know the truth of what the real issue was, they decided to get in contact with Cambodia, let them know that they were aware of the bomb, that they're not quite sure why this occurred. They would like to give them an opportunity to calm down, and they would like to listen and understand what their problems are, and that they're going to send a delegation to their country in 2 weeks to have discussions. And I didn't hear what the resolution was to that, but there weren't any more bombs that were dropped beyond that. So that is what a wheel-turning monarch can do. If they're practicing the teachings of the Buddha, they understand causality, they understand Dhamma and the natural law of Dhamma, and they understand that just launching warplanes to go bomb your neighboring country that just happened to drop a bomb on you isn't necessarily the best thing to do in all situations. So they were able to diffuse this without any bloodshed whatsoever. And this is a perfect example of what a wheel-turning monarch could do. And even though it's called a wheel-turning monarch, this could be a prime minister, a president, a community leader, anybody who's responsible for guiding a large population of people.
Okay, so Buddha would have been a wheel-turning monarch himself then?
He's not in a position of authority, so he wouldn't be a wheel-turning monarch, where a wheel-turning monarch would be someone who's in a position of authority. And today that would be like elected leaders and community leaders and things like that.
Okay, I understand. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. I will check the other platforms as well and see if we have any questions coming in. It looks like we have a question here on YouTube. What are the body-related things Buddha gave up to attain parinibbana? This isn't related to the chapters that we're talking about today. I'm not 100% what you mean by what are the body-related things the Buddha gave up. Maybe you can clarify that. Parinibbana is final enlightenment. So final enlightenment, he didn't have to do anything additional to get to final enlightenment, but there are certain things that he did in order to get to enlightenment itself. So if you'd like to clarify that, you can clarify that question and I'll answer it for you in our next question period. So we'll just move to the next chapter, which is chapter 23. If someone would like to read this, you're welcome to go ahead. Looks like it's you, Marcy.
My pleasure. There cannot be alteration in a stream enterer. Monks, there may be alteration in the four great elements in the earth element, the water element, the fire element, and the wind element, but there cannot be alteration in the noble disciple who possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. Therein, this is alteration, that the noble disciple who possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha might be reborn in hell, in the animal realm, or in the realm of afflicted spirits. This is impossible. Monks, there may be alteration in the four great elements, in the earth element, the water element, the fire element, the wind element, but there cannot be alteration in the noble disciple who possesses the virtues dear to the noble ones. Therein, this is alteration, that the noble disciple who possesses the virtues, moral conduct dear to the noble ones might be reborn in hell, in the animal realm, or in the realm of afflicted spirits. This is impossible.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here the Buddha is describing that there can be changes to the physical body. That's what he's talking about when he's saying the four great elements of earth, water, fire, and wind. We talked about this in a previous class, that this is how they describe the physical body during the lifetime of the Buddha. Nowadays, we have a lot more scientific research that we've done, and we describe it through cells and molecules and other words like this. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they described it through these four great elements. And he's saying, okay, there can be alteration to the physical body, but there can't be alteration for someone who has confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and that they're practicing the virtues or the moral conduct that's described in the Eightfold Path. That by the time you have that confirmed confidence, meaning elimination of doubt, and you've eliminated wrong behavior and observances, which is that third fetter, that by the time you've gotten to that point, you're not going to see alteration to the mind. Essentially, you're not going to be backsliding. There's not going to be decline of the mental faculties, that whatever concentration and focus, clarity of mind, deep memory, and other qualities of mind that you've cultivated on your way to the first stage of enlightenment, there's not going to be decline. It's not possible for this to occur. And once you get to that first stage of enlightenment, it's not possible for you to be reborn down into the lower realms of hell, animal, and afflicted spirits. If you die in that first stage of enlightenment, you will be reborn back into the human world. If you remember back to the chapter in volume 1, chapter 20, which is what I taught last week in the group learning program, we talked about the evolution of our consciousness from the animal realm to the human realm, and that when we're born into the human realm, a lot of us are coming out of the animal realm. So the unenlightened mind tends to function very much like an animal. Even though we're in the human realm, the consciousness has been conditioned like a animal because of our countless rebirths in the lower realms, that now, even though we're in the human realm with a human consciousness and a human body, we tend to function very much like an animal. So if we die when we're in that state, then we're going to most likely be reborn down into the lower realms in hell, animal, and afflicted spirits. But by the time you cultivate your consciousness to the point of becoming a stream enterer, you've essentially become a better and better and better human being. That's what the path to enlightenment is that you're learning how to become a better and better human being through the wisdom and cultivation of the mind. So if you die in the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to come back into the human world as a human being with another opportunity to get to enlightenment. This is part of the evolution of your consciousness. But when we're in that state of unenlightened with a lack of wisdom, we oftentimes function like a hell being or like an animal or like an afflicted spirit, even though we're in the human realm. And that's why we tend to be reborn into those lower realms. What is the cause of rebirth is craving, desire, attachment. This is the fuel that causes rebirth. So whether we're actually reborn or not is based on whether there's craving in the mind at the time of death. Which realm we're born into and what condition we are in that realm is based on the condition of our mind. It's based on the gamma, the cause and effect. Oftentimes people are taught that there's a being that is overseeing what's going on in the world and judging us over the totality of our life. And then when we die, we're judged based on every last little thing we ever did in our life. And then we're either going to hell, to a bad place, or we're going to a good place, to heaven. And these are permanent existences. But if you understand the natural laws of existence and things like the universal truth of impermanence, then you understand that these realms aren't permanent, that beings are coming in and out of these realms all the time, and that there isn't a being that is overseeing and judging you and determining which realm you go to. Instead, everything that you're experiencing is based on your own decisions. That's the causality that the Buddha was talking about, that you see this cause and effect, and what you experience in life is based on the decisions that you make. So if you choose to walk this path towards becoming a better and better human being, and you get to this first stage of enlightenment, not only will you not see a regression of the condition of the mind by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, but you won't be reborn into the lower realms. This is a result of your decisions, that you will be reborn back into the human realm. And conversely, if we are not in that stage of enlightenment and we're not practicing these teachings, we're just going through the world, knocking down trees and burning up the forest, then it can be the potential that we will be reborn into the lower realms. And that's a result of our decisions, not anybody else's decisions. So let me see what questions you guys have on this chapter. I see Eugene, you have a question. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute, you're welcome to ask your question.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you see me? I don't know. I'm not sure.
I can.
I can. Okay. Okay. My question is the following. The point about the confidence in the Buddha and in the teachings, I'm fine. I have the full confidence. With the community, I experienced so far almost just people or met people which went on the spiritual path or the process, but their knowledge is not based on the origins and on the origins of the teachings of the Buddha. It's usually mostly already influenced and changed by the time. And I'm struggling to accept, I'm accepting the part of the community and to have the confidence in the people when I see and I realize, like, I'm asking questions about where do they have their knowledge from, and people which don't have it, it's like really huge amount of people, they have not the origins as knowledge. Mm-hmm. And then you can kind of like say, okay, goodbye. You're not really part of community. Or how is this point of communities meant?
Sure. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, there was the Buddha and all of his students, ordained students and household students that were his community. And then there were other teachers in that same region of the world that were teaching various teachings. And all those teachers were claiming that it was their teachings that led to enlightenment. But the Buddha knew that it wasn't their teachings, that he had discovered what it took to get to enlightenment. And he could see that people were teaching to hang yourself upside down from trees, lays on beds of nails, starve yourself, pierce your body with metal implements. And none of these things led to enlightenment because he did these things and it didn't work. So he knew he had discovered discovered what it took to get to enlightenment. So there was his community, but then there were other communities as well. And what he's saying is that you would have confidence in the community that you're part of. So like all the students who are studying with me, we're part of a larger community of Buddhist practitioners, but we have our own little community here in Chiang Mai and online. I have thousands and thousands of students all over the world. And as you're learning these teachings closely, one of the reasons why an individual builds confidence in their community of practitioners that they're part of is that as you come around various members of the community, you start observing how people are practicing. So maybe you really admire how Marcy's being generous to read the chapters, and maybe she's using right speech, and you're like, oh wow, I would like to incorporate some of that into my practice. Or maybe Max is looking at Eugene in the way that you respectfully asked a question and is like, oh wow, I really like how he interacted with the teacher. He was so polite and respectful. I think I'll draw some of that into my practice. So the more that you're around your community of practitioners that are learning these good, wholesome teachings, you have these role models to be able to then absorb a certain amount of teachings. Of course, you're learning from your teacher, you're learning from the resources that a teacher is providing, but you're also learning and modeling your conduct around the community that you're part of. So this is what helps you to build your confidence, that as you interact in this community, that you start to be encouraged, supported, and motivated, and you start being able to better develop your practice based on observations that you have of members in the community. And this is what helps you to ultimately build your confidence. So what you're describing, Eugene, is people who aren't studying with me, or they're not studying maybe even the words of the Buddha or even the path to enlightenment. And that's why you probably don't have confidence in those individuals, but you shouldn't be dismissive of them, but just understand that they're not deeply practicing and they're not necessarily part of this community. But as you come part of this community more and more and you interact with different people, you might build your confidence more and more because you see the encouragement and the motivation and the support that people give you, and your ability to kind of glean some insight based on how other people are choosing to practice. All right, so he's giving the thumbs up there. So Marcy, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Teacher David. Thank you, Eugene, for your question, because it did spark an interest in a question that I had. Here in the United States, trying to seek out people that are of like-mindedness, I do find myself having the ability to share with people, but the exposure that you speak of, Teacher David, about being around people and seeing how they speak with right speech and all of this stuff, and wanting to model my actions like that is somewhat challenging. And so my question would be is, would it be beneficial for me to seek out a Thai community here within the United States and maybe generate some type of relationship with some people that are practicing Gotama Buddha's teachings here, to be a little closer, I guess, to more tangible humans and have more of a contact in being able to be surrounded by a community of that way? Because right now, like I said, a lot of what I'm surrounded by is a lot of people that are just, I'm noticing, and I can see it in my mind, all the discontentedness, and I'm able to see it. Just it's surmountable around me. I very rarely come across someone that is kind and loving and generous. So I didn't know if that's maybe something that might be beneficial.
You could, but you're not required to. And if you do decide to go in that direction, understand that a lot of the places that are set up as a temple or a Buddhist center, they're not necessarily practicing based on the words of the Buddha. So in my time in the US and here in Thailand, I've visited well over 200 temples in my lifetime, and I've only ever been to one that was sharing the teachings of the Buddha in the words of the Buddha. So that's less than 1%. So if you do enter into some of these communities, communities, while Thai culture is very informed by Buddhist teachings, and you'll see that the Thai people learn a lot of things like right in view, right intention, right speech. They won't necessarily call it that, but they're kind of growing up with those kinds of teachings in their household. But what they're practicing sometimes at the temple are the rites and rituals, ceremonies, worship, and things like this. So you could go in that direction and develop those kind of relationships, but don't feel like you're required to. The community that you guys are all part of is, we have this online community, we have this Facebook community, we have a community here in Chiang Mai, like we're having a international retreat coming up in August where people are coming in from all over the place to be able to be together with the community. So you guys are always welcome to participate in these kinds of things. You're also welcome to invite me into your local area in order to share the teachings and help build up a community in your local area, whether that's physically come there or whether you organize a little group of people and then I use Zoom to come in to meet with you guys, and maybe you could have me on a computer screen or a TV or something like that, and I can help you guys to learn. These are all options for you. But don't feel like you have to do it. But this is what the Buddha is referring to as a community, is that you normally are part of a community, and you guys are part of a community. It happens to be nowadays that we're doing it online and we're doing it in person as well. So we have this international community of people that can connect all over the world. Let's see, I'm not seeing any follow-up question from the person on YouTube. Let's see. So one thing I will say for this question on YouTube, Bhavana, I think that's the way you pronounce her name, I'm not sure. It says, what are the body-related things Buddha gave up to attain parinibbana? As I mentioned, parinibbana is final enlightenment, so there's nothing additional that he would need to let go of in order to get to parinibbana, because he already got to enlightenment. But also remember, everything that you're doing in order to get to enlightenment itself is inside the mind. It's not a bodily thing. It's all the work is being done inside the mind. So if you do have a follow-up, you're welcome to post that in YouTube, and I'll be able to answer. But I'm not quite 100% sure of your question there. And if you need to clarify that, feel free, and I'll answer anything that you share there. All right, so let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 24. We have a whole series of 4 different discourses that are all about accomplishment in view, and it's going to help you get insight into what it is that you're developing on this path in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So go ahead, Marcy.
6 cases of incompatibility by one accomplished in view. First disclosure. Monks, there are these 6 cases of incompatibility. What 6? One accomplished in view is incapable of considering any condition, phenomenon, thing as permanent. Incapable of considering any condition, phenomenon, thing as pleasurable. Incapable of considering any phenomenon, thing as self. Incapable of doing a grave act that brings immediate results. Incapable of resorting to the belief that purity, enlightenment, comes about through superstitious and auspicious acts. Incapable of seeking a person worthy of offering outside here. These are 6 cases of incompatibility.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So let's go through each of these individually. What the Buddha is talking about here is 6 things that are impossible for one who's accomplished in view. Now, in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you need to be accomplished in view. But when you first get started on the path, you start establishing right view. And I start students with that. I start students with understanding the 3 universal truths and the 4 noble truths. And this is what gets you started with establishing right view. You're not accomplished in view yet, but you're getting established in right view. In order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you need to not only establish right view through the 4 noble truths, but you need to get to accomplishment in view, where you're well accomplished in your view and how you view things in the world. So the Buddha gives 6 things here, and he's going to give several more discourses to help you understand how to attain accomplishment in view. The first one is incapable of considering any conditioned phenomenon or thing as permanent. Essentially, what he's referring to is the universal truth of impermanence. That in order for you to get accomplished in view, you would need to understand the universal truth of impermanence and be able to see that all the conditioned things or material objects around you are impermanent, in that they are not permanent. So by the time you get to accomplishment in view, you would be incapable of considering any conditioned object as permanent, because you would have deeply seen the truth of the universal truth of impermanence. You would be incapable of considering any conditioned object as providing you permanent pleasure, because you would understand that a conditioned object is impermanent and that conditioned feelings are impermanent. That while you might have a certain craving or clinging to a certain conditioned object, any kind of happiness, excitement, or pleasure that you experience as a result of that conditioned object and that craving or clinging to a conditioned object, it's not going to be permanent. So an enlightened being will be able to enjoy things. You'll actually enjoy way more out of life, but you will be incapable of considering a conditioned object as ultimately leading to pleasure, because you understand that that's conditioned pleasure and it's ultimately going to lead you to conditioned painful feelings as well. So you would understand the universal truth of discontentedness, which is the second universal truth. And then the third one he's talking about here is incapable of considering any phenomenon, thing, or object as a self, because you would have deeply understood the universal truth of non-self. By the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment and accomplishment in view, you would have eliminated personal existence view, which is that first fetter or that first pollution. And you wouldn't be able to describe or see or identify anything that would be the self. You know that this shirt is not you, this skin, this body, this mind, none of this is the self. So you would be incapable of considering anything to be a self, because you would have deeply understood the universal truth of non-self and eliminated personal existence view. This fourth one that he's talking about, incapable of doing a grave act that brings immediate results. What he's talking about here is something he's going to describe in the third discourse here, where there's these 5 things that are sometimes referred to as the 5 heinous crimes. They're things like killing your mother, killing your father, killing an enlightened being, shedding the blood of an arahant, shedding the blood of a Tathagata, a Buddha, with a mind of hatred. And the 5th one is to create division and separation within the community. And we'll talk about those in a moment when we get to that discourse. But the Buddha is saying you would be incapable of doing these 5 things. The 5th one is incapable of resorting to the belief that purity or enlightenment comes about through superstitious or auspicious acts. Because by the time you get to accomplishment in view and to the first stage of enlightenment, you would have understood dependent origination. We studied that last week. Dependent origination shows you that the number one problem is ignorance, the unknowing of true reality. And then all of these causally arisen objects ultimately lead to discontentedness in those discontent feelings. And you would know that in order to eliminate discontentedness, in order to get to enlightenment, you need to eliminate discontentedness and purify the mind. In order to do that, you need to eliminate ignorance. And the way to eliminate ignorance is to cultivate wisdom. So you learn, you reflect, independently verify, and you practice to cultivate wisdom. So you know that superstitious and auspicious acts, rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship isn't going to lead to enlightenment, because the problem that the unenlightened mind is experiencing is the unknowing of true reality, the ignorance. And there's no amount of water or any other rites or rituals or tying of strings or ringing bells or anything like that that's going to lead to wisdom. So you will have seen dependent origination and understood that. You would have eliminated wrong observances as part of the fetters, and you would know that there's no way that any superstitious or auspicious acts would lead to purity of the mind and helping the mind get to enlightenment. So you would be incapable of believing that anything that like that would lead to enlightenment, because you would have deeply seen the truth of what the real problem is, and you would know what the solution is, which is wisdom. And then the sixth one is incapable of seeking a person worthy of offerings outside of here. What that's related to is what I was just sharing, is that during the lifetime of the Buddha, there was him sharing teachings with a certain community of ordained and household practitioners. But then there were lots of other teachers who were sharing various things, and they had their own communities as well. And there were various people in the villages that were providing offerings and practicing generosity. And they were sharing their offerings with all kinds of different people that were coming through their village. But if somebody has gotten to accomplishment in view, and they've gotten to this first stage of enlightenment with significant improvement to the condition of the mind, they would have needed to deeply investigate the teachings of the Buddha in order to be able to get to that accomplishment in view and into the first stage of enlightenment, and seeing that improvement to the condition of their mind and the condition of their life. And if they've seen that truth, they would be incapable of making an offering to anybody outside of the Buddhist community, because they would know that those teachings of hanging yourself upside down from trees and starving yourself, laying on beds of nails, piercing your body with metal implements, this isn't going to lead to enlightenment, and you would be disinterested in supporting that type of teaching. But if you've accomplished in view and you've gotten to this first stage of enlightenment, then you would have seen the truth, and you would have no doubt that these teachings are leading to the improvement to the condition of the mind. So a person would be unable or incapable of making offerings to any practitioners that were practicing anything other than these good, wholesome teachings that are going to lead to enlightenment. And you would have seen that and be able to identify that on your own. What questions do you guys have on this discourse? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here, so let's go to the next one, which is chapter 25. Your mute's on. There you go, Marcy.
I was just waiting to see if there was anybody else that wanted to read. I just didn't want to just assume. Okay. 6 cases of incompatibility by one accomplished in view. Second discourse. Monks. There are these 6 cases of incompatibility. What 6? 1 accomplished in view is incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness towards the teacher. 2, incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness towards the teachings. 3, incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness towards the community. 4, incapable of residing without deep respect and politeness towards the training. 5, incapable of resorting to anything that should not be relied upon. 6, incapable of undergoing any 8th existence. These are the 6 cases of incompatibility.
Okay, so let me explain these for you. Based on the same things that I've been describing, that by the time you get to accomplishment in view, into the first stage of enlightenment, you've had significant improvement to the condition of the mind and the condition of your life. So any teacher who has helped you to be able to get to that, the Buddha is saying that, okay, now that you've seen that deep improvement to the condition of your mind and your life, you would be incapable of not having deep respect and politeness towards this teacher, because anybody who's helped you to get to that improved condition of mind and condition of your life, they would have done so without expecting anything in return from you, and you would have been able to see the improvement to the condition of your mind and your life, and you would have deep respect and politeness towards the teacher that has helped you to be able to get to that first stage of enlightenment. Same thing about the teachings. Any teachings that have led you to that improved condition of mind, you would have deep respect and politeness for that set of teachings and collection of teachings. And then the same thing for the community. As I was saying, being part of a community, these are people who are encouraging you, supporting you, motivating you. You're able to observe certain things that you admire about certain aspects of practice of certain members of the community, and you'll incorporate that into your practice. So these individuals have helped you. Yes, the teacher has helped you and the teachings have helped you, but the community has also been of help to you as well. So you would have deep respect and politeness towards this community. And the training itself, the actual day-to-day training that is prescribed and that you're actually undergoing as part of your training, you would have deep respect and politeness for that, because you would have seen the improvement to the condition of the mind in your life. And then number 5, incapable of resorting to anything that should be relied upon. What the Buddha is describing here is that in the unenlightened state, a being tends to cling to their perceptions, cling to certain assumptions. The perceptions are the way things seem to be in the world. We don't necessarily track down the truth and look for the truth in the unenlightened state. We tend to believe a lot of things. But by the time you've gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, you would have needed to learn, reflect, independently verify, and practice. You would have needed to cultivate a certain amount of wisdom and gotten rid of certain beliefs and replaced that with wisdom. And you would have done this work to let go of any kind of clinging to your perceptions or to assumptions. And not only would you do that in relationship to the teachings of the Buddha, but you would do that in your daily life too. So that if you were outside and you had a neighbor who came to you and was starting to gossip and slander about another neighbor and said all these bad things about another neighbor, you're not going to just believe those things. You're not going to just believe it, because you need to see the truth for yourself. And based on your experiences with this neighbor, you've had nothing but great experiences with this neighbor. So you're going to be incapable of resorting to anything that should not be relied upon, meaning you're going to investigate the truth. So like, let's just say you have children and one of your children came to you and said, mommy, Jimmy is hitting me and Jimmy's, doing this and Jimmy's doing that. Well, you're not going to just rely upon that. You're going to look for independently verifiable evidence that this has occurred. Are there any scratches on the child? Are there any red marks? Are there any bruises? Things like this. You're going to be looking for independently verifiable truth in all aspects of your life. So you will not be clinging to your perceptions. You won't be making assumptions in daily life by the time you get to accomplishment in view in this first stage of enlightenment. And then, having got to the first stage of enlightenment, you would be incapable of undergoing an eighth existence. That if you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will have a maximum of 7 rebirths by the time you get to enlightenment itself. It could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 1 more. You're going to have a maximum of 7, but you won't be capable of having an eighth existence. Any questions on this particular chapter? Go ahead, Eugene.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I tried to raise the right icon. Okay, I still didn't understood the point 6. Maybe because of English, I'm not sure yet.
Okay, so the 4 stages of enlightenment.
Sorry, the point about 7 and 8 lives. This is what I didn't understand.
Yeah, I understand. So the 4 stages of enlightenment, when you die in any particular stage of enlightenment, if you're in that first stage of enlightenment as a stream enter, when you die, you're going to come back into the human world if you're in that first stage of enlightenment. But you can't, you can only come, you're only going to come back a maximum of 8 times before you actually get to enlightenment. If you die in the second stage of enlightenment, you're going to come back 1 more time and you're going to get to enlightenment in that next rebirth. If you die in the third stage of enlightenment, you're going to be reborn into the heavenly realm and you're going to get to enlightenment there. And if you get to the 4th stage of enlightenment, your mind's enlightened in this life and you're not going to be reborn anywhere. But in that first stage of enlightenment, if you get to the first stage of enlightenment for the very first time, you will get to enlightenment. That's why we call it stream entry, because it's like the log entering the stream and you're going to eventually get to the ocean. So once you get to that first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment in a maximum of 7 rebirths. It doesn't mean you're going to be reborn 7 times, but you will get to enlightenment in a maximum of 7. So what the Buddha is saying here is that you're incapable of having an 8th existence, that you won't be reborn an 8th time by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I understand.
All right. So let's.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like we have any more questions. So let's move to. Oh, Marcy has a question. Go ahead, Marcy.
So Teacher David, my question is about stream entry. Now, I don't even know how I want to ask this question, but I don't want like ego or anything to be kind of in it, but like, is there a point where you can, by your own, reflection and stuff, say, I must be, or I am a stream enterer because, i.e., I have, experience memories from past lives, and then as I read through this discourse, like I feel very, very, very deeply confident in the words. I don't know if that makes any sense. If you know where I'm going here, I don't want to sound like I have ego, but I also am interested in understanding where I'm at, as if am I a stream enterer?
Right.
I guess to build that confidence that I'm going to reach enlightenment. I guess if that makes sense.
Yeah. By the time you study deeply enough and you understand all the criteria of what it takes to get to stream entry, when you get to stream entry, you would know it. But the challenge is that as a person or a practitioner who's in the first stage of enlightenment, there's still conceit, there's still arrogance, there's still pride. And sometimes what can occur is the ego's in there trying to convince you that you're more enlightened than you are, that you're perhaps in that first stage of enlightenment, and you might be convinced that you're in the first stage of enlightenment, but you're really not. So you can do a lot of work and you can deeply understand what it takes to get to the first stage of enlightenment and keep working towards that. And once you get there, you would have the criteria, but you always have to be a little bit suspicious of whether the ego's in there trying to convince you that you're more enlightened than you really are. So you use these stages of enlightenment for personal development purposes and to help you see what it takes for you to move from one stage to the next. But don't get obsessed about whether or not you're in one stage versus another stage. Just keep working the path. Just keep learning the path, keep working the path. So all these things that you're learning as part of this book, start learning those things if you haven't already understood them. Or if you only understand them to a certain degree, be sure to penetrate them more deeply. Or if the Buddha is sharing something with you that you have not learned at all, be sure that you learn that so that you can move along the path. If you're ever really truly interested, you can talk with me and I can help you to determine whether or not you're in the first stage of enlightenment or the second or the third or the fourth. But more appropriately, what I would just encourage people to do is never assume that you're in any particular stage of enlightenment, and just keep working to eliminate those 10 fetters. Because the challenge is that you could think you're in a particular stage of enlightenment and you're not, and conceit can arise, the arrogance and ego can arise, or complacency can arise. So it's better to just stay diligent to keep working until you get to the stage of enlightenment as an arahant, the fourth stage where your mind's actually enlightened. But if this is important to you and you would like to try to discern where you are in your journey, that's something that I can help you with, and you can develop that skill. And part of that is learning this book. In this particular volume, you're learning all the criteria of what it takes to get to that first stage of enlightenment. And then this retreat that I'm teaching in Thailand on August 20th through the 25th, I've put together all the teachings that somebody would need to be able to get to enlightenment in that one retreat, in those 6 days of the retreat. So if you can't attend that retreat, this is the next best thing, is learning about this particular volume here in the Pali Canon and English study group, and then meeting privately to discuss various aspects of the development of your practice. Eugene, did you have a question as well? I saw your hand went up again.
You came up with this point.
Okay.
It was about if you even need to know where you are and what stage you are. It's like that's what I wanted to ask, but you already replied.
Sure. Yeah, it helps you to the extent of knowing that, okay, you've eliminated one particular fetter or another, so that then you can focus more directly on some of the other fetters, but it's never wise to assume that any particular fetter has been eliminated, and just keep your mind alert and aware of any arising of any of those pollutions, so that where you see it arising, you can cut it out. Whereas if somebody assumed that they had eliminated wrong behaviors, for example, then when something arises, they might kind of not look at it very closely and be like, oh, no, I've already eliminated that fetter. And their mind has kind of been convinced falsely that they've eliminated a certain fetter, so they're not paying attention to it anymore. So it's wise to look at these fetters and understand which ones you have potentially eliminated, but never fully convince the mind that you've eliminated any of them, including when you get to enlightenment. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be experiencing, 3 months, 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years of complete peace and joy in the mind, but you're not interested in assuming that you're enlightened, because if any little icky bit of discontentedness arises, even in the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year mark, you would like to be able to identify it and then stamp it out. Whereas if we assume that the mind is enlightened, you might miss that little bit of ickiness, and you might be having conceit there, which means the mind isn't actually enlightened. So by not assuming that you're in any of these stages, but just diligently learning about each stage and then actively working towards it, that's what would help you to continue to progress.
Okay. On top of it, I have a question. It's like in one or two chapters before, you say that when you are you are incapable of getting pleasures or different feelings caused by conditioned. How was it called? Conditioned.
What you're thinking of is that you're incapable
conditioned behaviors. Yeah. For me, the point is, I observed as well that some things which happened, they don't. Nothing's changed in me. So there is no enthusiasm. I'm not getting angry. So I observe all of these things, and sometimes things might happen where I kind of feel not entirely like I'm getting that something changed, but like in my body I feel like a pulse is getting higher, like it's getting alerted. But I'm not sure if this is the point where this is the area where it starts first, then the emotion comes, and then the thoughts are coming. Or because each time when it comes, I'm really aware of it, that my body is kind of reacting or feeling strangely. So I can as well block it, because I know, okay, I'm feeling strange. I don't continue to think and to feel, and I detach as well. But this arising of this sensual feeling in the body, is this the first step, or it already happens after I got some sensual feelings and thoughts? Do you understand what I mean?
I understand a little bit of it. What the Buddha is describing here in this first discourse is all about the intellectual understanding. He's saying that you're incapable of considering a conditioned object as being pleasurable, because you know that it's a conditioned object, so therefore it's going to only create conditioned pleasant feelings. What you're describing is based on what you're experiencing and what you're feeling, which, let's discuss this offline, maybe at the end of the class. If you would like to stick around and discuss it some more, we can. But here, the Buddha is talking about the intellectual understanding in that first discourse. Okay, so let me see if we have any questions on this second discourse anywhere. I don't see any questions. So let's go to now chapter 26, which is the third discourse of this type.
Six cases of incompatibility by one accomplished in view. Third discourse. Monks, there are these 6 cases of incompatibility. What 6? One accomplished in view is 1. Incapable of depriving his mother of life. 2. Incompatible of depriving his father of life. 3. Incompatible of depriving an arahant of life. 4. Incompatible of shedding the Tathagata's blood with the mind of hatred. 5, incompatible of creating a division in the community. 6, incapable of acknowledging another teacher. These are the 6 cases of incompatibility.
Okay, so this is the first 5 are the grave acts that bring immediate results that the Buddha was talking about in the previous discourse. You're incapable of depriving his mother of life. So you'd be incapable of killing your mother, your father, because by the time you get to this accomplishment in view and you've gotten to this first stage of enlightenment, you would know that you're in the ideal existence as a human being to be able to get to enlightenment, and you would really treasure and value this existence in the human realm, and it's your mother and father that helped you to accomplish that. So this improvement that you've seen to the condition of the mind in your life, you would be incapable of killing your parents because you would have deep appreciation for them being able to have given you this life to be able to now come into the world and actually sustain your life to be able to get to enlightenment. Because what you're experiencing in that first stage of enlightenment is quite nice in terms of what the mind is experiencing. You're still experiencing discontentedness, but you're experiencing significant improvement of qualities versus what you once experienced in your life. So you would be incapable of killing your parents. You'd also be incapable of killing an arahant or an enlightened being, because you would understand how important enlightened beings are to a community. And having enlightened beings around in a community is going to help everyone to be able to get to enlightenment and learn the teaching. So you would be incapable of killing an enlightened being. You'd be incapable of shedding the blood of a Tathagata with a mind of hatred. A Tathagata is a Buddha. The word Tathagata means the one who's discovered the truth, or the one who shares the truth. So the Buddha often referred to himself as the Tathagata. He didn't refer to himself as a Buddha very frequently. He most often referred to himself as the Tathagata, and other people refer to him either as the Tathagata or the perfectly enlightened one, or ascetic Gotama or monk Gotama. They had all these different ways of referring to him. There wasn't just one set way because of the universal truth of impermanence. But if you got to accomplishment in view in this first stage of enlightenment, and there was a Buddha that was in existence during your lifetime, you would understand how important it is to have this being in the world, and you would be incapable of shedding their blood. Now, if you turned around and accidentally cut them with a knife, okay, their blood is coming, but it wasn't with a mind of hatred, right? So you would be incapable of hating a actual Buddha. In that first stage of enlightenment, your mind still has ill will. So you're still going to have a certain amount of hatred towards other beings, but you wouldn't hate a Buddha by the time you get to that first stage of enlightenment, having seen the progress and improvement that you're experiencing. And because this community has been so beneficial to you, you would be incapable of creating division in the community. Because you've seen that improvement to the condition of your mind, you wouldn't be interested in creating division in this community, because this community has been very beneficial to you, and you would like to see others experience the same benefit as well. So you wouldn't be trying to create division about gossiping or slandering or breaking up or arguing amongst a particular community that has helped you to get to this first stage of enlightenment. And you would be incapable of acknowledging another teacher, because, as I mentioned, any particular teacher that has helped you get to that first stage of enlightenment, you would be incapable of acknowledging some other teacher, because the benefits that you're experiencing in the quality of your mind in your life are so significant, and you know that it's this person that's helped you to get to that, and you would be incapable of acknowledging somebody else that you would know that this person has helped you, and you would be dedicated to learning and continuing to grow and evolve based on the teachings that this particular teacher is sharing. So these are the 6 cases of incapability, the third discourse. Any questions on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here, so we'll go to the 4th discourse, which is chapter 27.
Six cases of incapability by one accomplished in view. 4th disclosure. Monks, there are these 6 cases of incapability. What 6? One accomplished in view is incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made by oneself. incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made by another, incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are both made by oneself and made by another, incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are not made by oneself but have arisen by accident or chance, incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are not made by another but have arisen by accident or chance, incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made neither by oneself nor by another but have arisen by accident or chance. These are the 6 cases of incapability. For what reason? Because the person accomplished in view has clearly seen causation and casual arising objects. These are the 6 cases of incapability.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So let me ask you guys, what is the cause of pleasant feelings and painful feelings? Go ahead, anybody can answer.
Cravings and attachments to impermanent objects.
Right. Craving, desire, attachment, the mental longing and strong eagerness. So anybody who's accomplished in view would understand that pleasure and pain are not caused by one's self, because you know there is no self. And you know that pleasure and pain are caused by craving, desire, attachment. So you would be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made by oneself, because you already know it's craving, desire, attachment that causes that, and you know that there isn't a self. So you would be incapable of this. And the same thing with all these others. You'd be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made by another person. You would know that any discontentedness arising in the mind is caused by craving, desire, attachment. You would be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain are made both by oneself and made by another, because you know it's craving, desire, attachment. And you would be incapable of resorting to the view that pleasure and pain has arisen by accident or chance. And then the Buddha is giving different variations of that as well. That you know it's not by accident or chance that pleasant feelings and painful feelings are arising. It's craving, desire, attachment. So perhaps you guys have this one locked down, right? Maybe you guys got this one under your belt. In addition to all the other things that you need to do to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you understand this aspect of accomplishment in view. Any questions on this one? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so let's move to the next one. This is chapter 28. I'm not going to have you read this one, Marcy. What I normally do here in the Pali Canon English study group when we come across a chapter that is the Eightfold Path, what I do is I just open up to any questions you guys have, because I've deeply shared the teachings of the Eightfold Path in the group learning program and various classes, courses, and retreats that I teach. I go through it in detail, and it takes me a minimum of about an hour and a half, 2 hours to fully teach the Eightfold Path. And there's some classes where I break it up into 3 sections, and I take 6 hours to go through and teach every single aspect of the Eightfold Path. So instead of reading it here, what I usually do is just see if there's any questions, because you guys need to be dialing in each one of these 8 factors closer and closer into your practice, and you might have questions about one particular factor or another. So if you guys have any questions, let me know, and I will help you to clarify any of the individual factors that you might be needing help with. So Marcy, you have a question?
Yes. So my question is, aside from the 5 precepts, when is it okay to fulfill a craving versus letting it go?
Okay. So there's going to be multiple approaches to eliminate a certain craving. What you would like to do is ultimately get to the point where you've eliminated all cravings, desires, attachments. There's no mental longing, strong eagerness in the mind. Your mind's firmly rooted in the middle way, and you're able to pursue things as a goal, objective, or interest. But you're not chasing, you're not longing, you're not yearning. So in the process of getting to that point, you're going to be identifying various cravings, desires, attachments in your mind that are arising. And what you would like to do with a combination of breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity is generally be training the mind to let go, let go, let go, so that you can train the mind to be able to observe these cravings and to be able to more and more easily let them go. And you're going to need to restrain the mind multiple times before any one particular craving is eliminated from the mind. So it's going to take you a lot of time for some of these cravings. Some of the easier ones, it's like an onion. The outer layer will fluff off really easy. But as you get going on the path, some of the deeper held attachments, the stronger attachments, are deeper and harder to let go of, so that you need to restrain the mind multiple times. And you need to accumulate the benefits of breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity before the mind will ultimately let go of that attachment. So it's really cut it off multiple times, sometimes over months, sometimes over years, before a particular attachment will finally be released from the mind. While you're in the process of doing this, there are some particular cravings, desires, attachments that the way to eliminate it is to actually fulfill it. So one of the common examples that I use is like if you always had a burning desire to go to the Philippines, and you've always wanted to go to the Philippines, and you have this obsession to go to the Philippines. One of the ways to eliminate that craving is to just go to the Philippines and see it. So you can check it off your list, like been there, done that, and I don't have that craving anymore because I know what it's like. So in this situation, that particular craving, it's not going to cause any harm by you going to the Philippines and checking it out and seeing it and training the mind to let that go. But if you have a craving to go out and kill somebody, you're not interested in fulfilling that craving because that's going to cause certain significant harms, and then that harm is going to come back to you. So what you're looking at is you're looking at the harm. If there's a certain craving that isn't going to cause harm meaning physical injury or injury to someone's material possessions or injury to someone's reputation or something like that, if it's not going to cause harm to an individual or to yourself, then it's oftentimes helpful to just fulfill the craving. So some things that you wouldn't fulfill are things like killing or stealing or sexual misconduct or lying or substances that cause heedlessness. Yes, those 5 precepts, you're not interested in fulfilling those cravings. But as you're working towards maybe letting go of coffee, maybe you've let go of coffee for 3, 4, 5, 6 days, maybe a week, and you feel the pressure of this craving coming up in your mind, and gosh, you just want to have a coffee so badly because you have this craving for it. Well, maybe you go have a coffee, but then you get right back into eliminating it, and now you go 2 weeks or 3 weeks without having a coffee. And then now maybe you decide to have a coffee. And this kind of releases the pressure out of the mind, because letting go of these cravings is kind of like a dam. Like if the water is rising up on the dam, one of the ways that they release the pressure is they just open the dam and they let the water out. And then when the water is lowered, they just close the dam back up. Because if they allow that water to keep building, it's going to break the dam, it's going to damage it, and they have a multi-million-dollar project on their hands to be able to fix this dam. So it's the same thing, that if you're trying to eliminate certain cravings that aren't harmful to others, that if you feel the pressure building up in your mind, sometimes it's better to just fulfill a little bit, give the mind a little bit of what it wants in order to release the pressure. And then when the pressure drops back down, now you get back on it and you start working to eliminate it and get further and further away from this craving. So look at the harm involved. And if you have certain examples, I can let you know. If you're having challenges, you can post it into the Facebook group. You can ask questions in class, send me a private message, or schedule personal guidance, and I can help you see more and more clearly which one of these cravings or not are going to cause harm or not. All right, let's see if we have any questions on social media about the Eightfold Path. It looks like we have a question here from Tonka. I tried not eating any animal products and my digestion got very bad. Would it be necessary to be pure vegan in order to follow the Eightfold Path 100%? Did people in Buddha time eat animal products? So what you will notice if you decide to transition over to animal product or vegan is you'll notice that your digestion will go through changes, and it'll feel uncomfortable in some situations. So this is why you would like to do it gradually, that you gradually move towards vegan rather than doing it really quickly, because the body has gotten attached and gotten dependent, and the mind has gotten dependent on these animal products. So if you kind of like have one meal a day that's vegan and do that for a few weeks, and then maybe 2 meals a day every other day, and then one meal every other day, kind of this kind of thing, or one day vegan, one day you're eating meat, one day vegan, one day eating meat. This will help the body and the mind adjust more readily. So whatever you experience with digestion, I experienced those things too, and it took a while for the body and the mind to be comfortable with that. So I would encourage you to continue to look at that and work towards getting to vegan if that's something that you're interested in doing. During the lifetime of the Buddha, there was people who ate animal products just like today, and the effects of eating animal products during the lifetime of the Buddha wasn't as significant as it is today. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they were still being affected by the killing and the eating of animal products, but today it's much more significant, because when we're eating animal products, we're eating drugs, hormones, and toxins that have been injected into the animals, that the animals have picked up through groundwater and things like this. So it's a lot more important for us to get to a plant-based food supply today, that it's going to help you to improve the health of the body and the health of the mind, because as long as you're ingesting those animal products, you're ingesting the drugs, hormones, and toxins, and it's going to be hard for you to get the clarity of mind. So if you decide to move to predominantly plant-based food supply, this is going to help to improve the health of the body and the health of the mind. But you need to do that gradually and slowly. I suspect that because we are like the first generation that is majorly moving to a vegan food supply, that there's going to be some people who are going to really struggle with that and be really challenged with that. And you may even find that you need 5% or 10% of your food to be of animal products, but try as best as you can to get to a plant-based food supply, because that's where you're going to see the most improvement to the condition of the mind and the condition of the body. And you won't have those drugs, hormones, and toxins affecting the mind, and it won't be affecting the body. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, people did eat meat just like nowadays. But at one time in human history, human beings were exclusively plant-based eaters. That you can look back over history, and you can look at our teeth, and you can see that we at one time were plant-based eaters. We only started eating meat out of necessity. And now, as humanity, we're starting to go back to being plant-based eaters, because we see the importance of doing that for our own health and for the health of the environment. So you can most likely make additional efforts to move to plant-based food supply, but understand that the body and the mind is going to need some time to adjust to this. It's not going to be something that is the body's just going to naturally accept. You're going to experience some digestion. I think I experienced it for a good 6 months to a year. And initially it was more significant, and then it kind of tapered off from there. But ultimately, when I got to the other side of that, there's all kinds of improvements that you experience by moving to a plant-based food supply. So like a lot of these cravings, you kind of have to walk through the fire to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. And that whether it's food, or whether it's an attachment to a relative, or like a child or somebody, or some attachment to a possession or something like this, oftentimes the mind becomes very discontent as you're letting go of certain attachments, and the body can revolt as well. But when you get to the other side of that, that's where the real liberation and the improvement to the condition of the mind in your life, in the physical body in this case, really is experienced. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let me go ahead and move to the next chapter, which is chapter 29. Go ahead, Marcy.
How a stream enterer is called. Monks, when a disciple thus understands, as they really are, the cause and the passing away of the world, he is then called a noble disciple who is accomplished in right view, who is accomplished in vision, who has arrived at these true teachings, who sees these true teachings, who possesses a trainee's wisdom, who possesses a true wisdom, who has entered the stream of the teachings, a noble one with penetrative wisdom, one who stands squarely before the door of the deathless, enlightenment.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here, this first sentence that the Buddha is explaining, he's saying that a noble disciple, someone who studied very deeply, and ultimately he says someone who's a stream enterer, that they've already seen this causing and passing away of the world. What he's saying here is that you understand that you understand the universal truth of impermanence, that you understand that this world is not permanent. Humanity is not permanent. Oftentimes in the unenlightened state, we crave and we cling and we want humanity and civilization to be permanent. But if you've deeply seen the universal truth of impermanence, then you know that this humanity, this civilization that we're all living in is not permanent, and the earth itself is not permanent. There's constant change, that there's this arising and passing away. And that having done that, you've developed a certain amount of wisdom to get to this first stage of enlightenment. And then he says that you're standing squarely before the door of the deathless. I talked about this in a recent class where when you're in the unenlightened state, and you're experiencing birth and death and birth and death, you're experiencing the birth and death. You're roaming and wandering through this cycle of rebirth. But by the time you get to enlightenment, the mind is now liberated. You're outside of this cycle of rebirth. You're no longer going to experience death at that point. When you get to enlightenment and then this final life comes to an end, we call it final enlightenment. Or we call attaining enlightenment as attaining the deathless element, because you will no longer experience death at that point. That you can eliminate all your cravings, desires, attachments, except for one, as long as you're living in this particular life. That you can completely train the mind to eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments that exist in the mind. But even when you get to enlightenment, there's one last attachment, which is the physical body and the mind are together. You can't eliminate that as long as you're in existence. So that's why you still experience a certain amount of physical pain, even when you're in the enlightened mental state. It'll be very muted, it'll be very insignificant, but you still experience some physical pain. And you need that, because if you were, as an enlightened being, standing too close to a fire, you need to know that there's heat there and to make the decision to move away. Where in the unenlightened state, when you experience that, you might have also experienced mental anguish, where you were angry or frustrated that this has occurred. In the enlightened state, you'll feel the physical sensation associated with the fire, but you won't experience the mental anguish because you've now gotten to enlightenment. So by the time you get to this first stage of enlightenment, you are one who stands squarely before the door to the deathless, meaning that you haven't entered into enlightenment. You haven't entered into this state of no longer experiencing death, but you're standing right in front of the door, able to walk through it. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you have now attained the deathless element. You will no longer experience death. You will experience final enlightenment at the end of this life. And that's where the body and the mind will separate. And now you will no longer experience any physical pain whatsoever. So that's what he's referring to here, that you will have seen the universal truth of impermanence, and that you're standing squarely in front of the potential to be able to get to this deathless element or enlightenment. Any questions on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here, so we'll go to the last chapter, which is chapter 30.
The 10 fetters. Monks, there are these 10 fetters. What 10? The 5 lower fetters and the 5 higher fetters. And what are the 5 lower fetters? Personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observances, sensual desire, and ill will. These are the 5 lower fetters. And what are the 5 higher fetters? Desire for form, desire for formlessness, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance. And these are the 5 higher fetters. These monks are the 10 fetters.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So the 10 fetters are the 10 individual pollutions or taints or defilements that the Buddha discovered in the mind. And what you're doing on this path to enlightenment is you're working to eliminate all 10 of these. Because by eliminating these 10 fetters, that's where that brightness and radiance of the enlightened mind will shine through. So each one of these fetters, you would need to know what they are, how to eliminate them, and how to know that you actually have eliminated them. This is what I teach as part of the classes, courses, and retreats that I teach. And in different classes and courses and retreats, I will focus in on these individual fetters. Sometimes I just teach one class on the 10 fetters, or I'll teach one class on one individual fetter, like personal existence view, or one class on just doubt or wrong behavior and observances, and so forth. So you will need to know what each individual one of these are, how to eliminate them, and how to know that you have eliminated them. By knowing what the fetter is, then you'll understand the symptoms, and when it's arising, you'll be able to identify it. So like, say for example, if you understand personal existence view, if you're out and about in the world and you spill chocolate ice cream on your shirt and you get embarrassed, you would know that that's from personal existence view. And you would know, like, there's personal existence view still in the mind. I need to eliminate that, right? And you would know how to eliminate it. And if you don't, you would get help from your teacher of how to eliminate it. And you would know how to determine that you have eliminated it. So every single aspect of the teachings of the Buddha is guiding you to eliminate these 10 fetters, whether you realize it or not. Something like the 5 precepts, a simple teaching like the 5 precepts, is guiding you to eliminate the 10 fetters. Certain individual fetters. So for example, that first precept of living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings and abandoning killing, that is helping you to eliminate the fetter of ill will. The second precept of abandoning the taking of what is not given, not stealing, that's helping you to eliminate sensual desire. Same thing with the third precept, where you're learning to eliminate the sexual misconduct. That's also helping you to eliminate sensual desire. These are also helping you to eliminate wrong behaviors as well. So each one of these individual teachings that the Buddha is describing, whether it's the 5 precepts or the Eightfold Path or any of the other teachings that he's teaching you, he's guiding you to eliminate all of these 10 fetters, but he's not necessarily calling it out. So as you're developing those foundational teachings as part of things like the Eightfold Path, you're developing that as your foundation, which includes your meditation practice. Eventually, as you develop those foundational teachings, you start experiencing the jhanas, which are 4 preliminary phases that the mind starts experiencing these glimpses of the peace and the joy for a few minutes, a few hours, maybe a few days. And as you're starting to experience those jhanas, that's the indication to you that you're putting together the foundational teachings really well. And now it's time to start focusing on the fetters. Even though you've already been working to eliminate some of the fetters, that's the whole reason why you're experiencing the jhanas to begin with, is because the pollution is starting to be eliminated out of the mind, but you haven't been directly understanding necessarily what each individual fetter is and how to actually eliminate them. So once you get your foundational teachings underway and you know those really well, like the Eightfold Path, if you know that inside and out and you're practicing it better and better all the time, and now you're looking for the next thing to learn, as you're starting to experience the jhanas, you should start focusing on the 10 fetters and understanding what they are, so that you know that when they're arising in the mind, you can see that clearly, understand how to eliminate each one of them, and understand how to know when it actually has been eliminated. And that's what's going to ultimately bring your mind to enlightenment, by eliminating all 10 of these fetters, which you're going to need the foundational teachings to be able to do. You can't just from the very beginning go in and start eliminating the fetters. You need to start developing your foundation first, and then graduate into understanding these and actually eliminating them. So let me see what questions you guys have on these. Marcy, go ahead.
Thank you, Teacher David. My question to you is, you had said before, like I could sit with you and figure out where I'm at with stream enter, but upon reflection of all of this, would it be possible to maybe just sit with you and then just see where I'm at to see if I need to start working on the 10 fetters? I think I have an attachment to trying to find out if I'm a stream enter, so I kind of I'm more interested in just kind of letting that go and maybe just having a session for you to see where I'm at, to see if maybe now is a time that I know the foundation teachings enough to maybe begin chopping away at these 10 fetters.
Sounds like a good plan to me.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, Teacher David.
Yes. And by the way, for those of you guys that are looking to understand these 10 fetters more, down in this chapter that is in volume 5, chapter 30, you can see where I've described each individual fetter, what they are. And I even have this in volume 1, chapter 3. So you can get familiar with these at any point in your development of this path to enlightenment. But just know that here's where I describe those for you in detail. Because up here, the Buddha is just listing out what these fetters are. And then his students would know what they are because he would be explaining them to them. But here is a detailed description of what these fetters are. And you have that in this chapter, and you have it in other places as well. And then there's classes and courses and retreats that I teach where I focus on these fetters, and they're actually recorded. So if you're at a point where you would like to investigate these at any point, any of you, then you can look at the books that I've shared, the content on this, the videos, the podcasts, and things like that. And that'll all help you to develop your wisdom around these 10 fetters. Okay, so let me make one more look at the social media. So here, Tonka's asking the question, can we work on all fetters at the same time? Yes, you can. You can have a general awareness of all these fetters, and the more that you understand the totality of all the fetters, then whenever you see even like conceit, like right now, say someone's not even in the jhanas yet, but let's just say they understand the fetter of conceit and the arrogance and the pride and the judging and measuring and comparing. Even though they're not even in the jhanas yet, if they understand the 10 fetters, if they see that arising, that conceit arising in the mind, they can cut that off and let it go because they understand the Eightfold Path. So even though I say that when you're in the jhanas, that's the appropriate time to more intensely start looking and directly looking at the 10 fetters and understanding them and then working to eliminate them, that doesn't mean you have to wait until then. It just means that that's the point where, okay, you've gotten your foundational teachings well underway because you're experiencing those jhanas, and now's the time to directly start focusing on eliminating the 10 fetters because you've already been putting together the Eightfold Path and everything else. But even as you're developing your foundational teachings, if you notice any conceit or you notice any ill will or things like that, you can still be cutting that off and letting it go and working to eliminate that even at those parts of developing your practice. So the more you understand all the fetters, then any time any one of them raises their head, you can cut it off. It's kind of like that game, like that whack-a-mole game, that when the mole brings its head up, you kind of whack it. That's what you'd like to do with these fetters, that it's as you know about these fetters and you start seeing them raise their ugly head, you like to whack them and knock them back down, right? All right, so great questions there, guys. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions here. Just seeing lots of thanks for Marcy to read, which I appreciate as well. Marcy, thank you for reading. So what I'll do then is just encourage you guys to look at the next set of chapters in this book, which would be chapters 31 through 40. That's what we're going to be studying next week. So you guys can be reading these before class and or after class, because remember, you've got the words of the Buddha, you've got the reference, and you've got my words too. Because in the class, I can't go into the same level of detail that I've gone into in the books. So to really glean the most benefit out of the Pali Canon and English study group and all the other programs that I teach too, you would like to read the books in combination with attending the classes. That's what's really going to help you get the most insight in the wisdom that you need to be able to progress towards enlightenment. So thank you all for joining for this class. And if you'd like to join for the group learning program tomorrow on Sunday, we're going to be in chapter 21 of volume 1. That chapter is titled Do No Harm, the Future of Our Planet, or the Future of the Planet. And here's where we're going to have a discussion about the planet and what we can be doing as individuals to make wiser decisions about how we interact with the planet. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation together. And for those of you guys that are in Chiang Mai, or you're hearing this and you're in Chiang Mai, on Monday, I'm going to be starting a 5-day course, which is called Foundation in the Teachings on the Path to Enlightenment. So you're able to attend at the temple Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I'm going to be teaching there. You can just show up and partake in any of the learning that you would like there. I'm going to be helping you to establish a really good foundation for the path to enlightenment. So thank you all for your questions. Thank you, Marcy, for reading. Thank you all for your dedication and diligence to learning these teachings. We'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.